to this lady, Lady Dimitrescu, with the general reaction from the internet being, I want her to sit on me. And then seemingly that was just gonna be the whole situation. But then the official Resident Evil Twitter account was like, okay, I know what we gotta do. Let them know specifically, if you include her hat and high heels, she's 2.9 meters, approximately 9'6" tall. Information that, one, apparently resulted in several hundred of you adding me and emailing me, and two, information that made YouTube's own Markiplier horny on the main. Now, I won't shame you for it, but if you keep it up, I'm gonna have to bonk you, unless you're into that. Here's the show. And the first things we're gonna touch on today, we have entertainment/entertainer news, starting with TikTok. So there's this popular silhouette challenge on TikTok that has created a lot of controversy. Essentially, it's a trend where people, primarily women, are sort of kind of standing around in normal clothes and lighting, and then they strike a pose and add a filter that creates a red light around them, essentially turning their body into a black silhouette. And often, when they do the silhouette, they take off some or maybe even all of their clothes, so there's more curves to the silhouette. And the people taking part range from everyday women to celebrities like Lizzo, Tiffany Haddish, and large creators like Lauren Gray. But now you have a lot of people trying to urge others to not participate in this challenge, or at least be careful when they do so. And this because anyone that's ever dabbled with photo or editing software knows you can change the lighting and contrast of these videos. And doing so in a way here that pretty much removes or severely decreases the silhouette, meaning that people can actually see the body. In fact, right now on YouTube, there are how-tos that have thousands or even hundreds of thousands of views on how to do this. There was also a subreddit for this called Silhouette Unfiltered, but that has been banned for violating Reddit's rules against involuntary pornography. So, do what you want with your body, but be careful because there's a lot of people involuntarily showing more than they expected. Which actually kind of on that note, another piece of TikTok news, we had Chloe Bailey in the news. She's a 22-year-old singer. She took part in a challenge that I'm sure no men watching this are familiar with called the Bus It Challenge. And actually, it's another one of these challenges where you go from kind of wearing big baggy stuff to kind of, let's just say not. And when Chloe did it, it could be argued she killed it. It was done. The trend was over at that point. Why even try? I would show the video to you right now, but one, it might be against YouTube's terms of service, and two, your head might explode. I don't want your blood on my hands. But, like when any grown-ass woman decides to do something with their body, in addition to the praise, in addition to the weird comments, she also got shamed. In fact, she ended up getting a number of comments criticizing her for being what they said was too sexy in her Bus It Challenge and in other videos and photos that she posted on Instagram, which is a stupid argument in my opinion. As we've already established, she's a grown-ass woman doing her own grown-ass thing. Following this, part of the story became that you had other women like Gabrielle Union standing up for Chloe Bailey, telling her to keep shining. But I think in general, maybe the lesson of this story is unless someone's hurting, maybe we should all try to mind our own damn business more. Like, there's so much real shit going on in the world. Are we really gonna lose our mind over a 22-year-old doing something with her body that really hurts nobody? I get that a part of the population of the planet in this country, like they feel victimized when someone just feels comfortable in their own skin and they do something that doesn't affect them in any way. Maybe, I don't know, take a moment for self-reflection and let's just move past it. And then let's talk about business/financial news because we had Robinhood back in the news, which just a quick note, as I mentioned last Thursday, Robinhood's no longer getting sponsorships on my show. I'm moving my money. As I mentioned yesterday, I am now sponsored by Public and have an affiliate link, publicphil.com. If you want to move along with me or sign up for the first time, it's a win-win. I get paid because they know I sent you and you get some free stock. And two, I'll figure out a faster way to mention that anytime I talk about Robinhood, which based on this news, there may be multiple times in the coming weeks. A, for transparency reasons at this point, I have an anti-Robinhood bias, and B, I don't want to inadvertently support and push an app that I don't even trust with my money. But that said, Robinhood is in the news. They have at least a few rough weeks ahead of them, with one of those reasons being Vlad Tenev, co-CEO of Robinhood, is now expected to testify before the House Financial Services Committee on February 18th. With this news coming as committees in both the House and the Senate have announced investigations into Robinhood's decision last Thursday to cut off users from buying new shares of GameStop while also still allowing old shares to be sold, which notably was a move that appeared to heavily favor Wall Street hedge funds over everyday investors. And as such, both chambers of Congress will be focusing their probes on whether or not those hedge funds played a role in Robinhood's decision, though Tenev, for his part, has denied that claim. Instead, saying that decision was because the surge on GameStop stock resulted in an initial $3 billion bill from clearinghouses, saying that Robinhood only had $2 billion available at that time. But that explanation has fallen short for a ton of people, given Robinhood's initial reasoning as far as why they were doing this, the god-awful communication, which is also why Robinhood is now facing dozens of lawsuits. Among those suits, you have one man alleging the Robinhood blocked retail or investors for no legitimate reason, notably adding that the app failed to provide adequate explanation about pulling a profitable stock from its platform and knowingly put their customers at a disadvantage compared to customers who used other trading apps. That man, along with many of the other people filing these suits, are asking the courts to force Robinhood to fully reinstate access to GameStop stock, as well as paying financial damages to any Robinhood users who were unable to execute GameStop stock trades. We've also seen people taking out their anger on Robinhood by rating their app 1 star in app stores. Initially, we saw Google coming to the rescue by deleting 100,000 negative reviews. However, the app's rating has been falling down again, and this time Google says that it will not be removing those reviews. But also, with all of this, I do want to say, I know that I've said it on Twitter in one way, I don't know if I've said it in a show, I do believe that there needs to be a conversation regarding influencers and the stock market, right? And I think there is a question of where is the line as far as the responsibility of someone saying, hey, I'm putting my money in this, I'm here for the ride, it's kind of fun, and the number of influencers that have their money in certain things and they're like, insert blank is going to the moon, and then once their followers and what they've helped kind of create as far as a wave has really gotten big, they just sell off, right? Because then you're just talking about a manipulative pump and dump. And then someone that's not you, often someone in a far less privileged position, is left holding that bill. Like how many people that were like, hey, put your money in GameStonk when it was $450, got out before it's, it's at 100 now. Like I'm not trying to villainize any specific people. I just think there needs to be a conversation around the responsibility, because obviously if other people are investing in the stock market, they are other grown-ass people, but our words matter, and it's just something that, especially over the last 2 weeks, that it's just gotten stuck in my head. Then, in quick news that just broke as I was uploading and we'll be talking about later, it is being reported that Jeff Bezos will be stepping down as the CEO of Amazon. And as far as what comes next, for Bezos, some reports are saying that he will be transitioning to an executive chair role, while others have said that he will be dedicating his time to defeating Superman. And then let's take a second to pay some bills and thank the fantastic sponsor of today's show, Stereo. And Stereo, if you don't know, is a new live broadcast platform that I've been trying out the past week. I actually went live with my wife Lindsay yesterday. We answered a bunch of your questions like,
hey, how do y'all settle a fight between both of y'all? Just curious.
Because of course that's what you would ask. But it was great to hear from you beautiful bastards. You sent in some good questions. We tested it at first with the text line. I also just kind of like the live nature of doing a Q&A like this, or having a back and forth and then the audience being able to chime in, because you never really know what to expect. It's a lot of fun, and if you missed yesterday's live, you want to check it out, you can listen to it right now on my profile on Stereo, link down below. And you can actually catch me live again with my dad on Wednesday and my EP Amanda on Friday. But yeah, all you gotta do is go to stereo.com/Franco, download the app, follow me there, and get those questions ready to submit for the next live chat. Then let's talk US politics, because the Biden executive orders have continued. In fact, Biden signing 3 executive orders today focused on immigration. The first, and arguably most significant one, will revoke Trump's executive order that sought to justify separating children from their parents and create a task force aimed at reuniting families that have been separated. Though this will likely be a tough job because, as we've talked about in the past, there is a lack of records. According to court documents, around 55 500 children have been identified as having been separated from their families under Trump, including about 600 whose parents have not yet been found. Then you have the second order that will outline a multi-step process to manage the migration of asylum seekers at the southern border and roll back what it called the most damaging policies adopted by the prior administration. Among other things, this includes addressing the underlying issues that cause migrants to seek asylum, providing asylum seekers access to legal avenues in the United States, and taking other broad actions to restore America's asylum system by both rescinding and reviewing numerous Trump administration policies. This including reviewing the Migrant Protection Protocols program, otherwise known as Remain in Mexico, which forced asylum seekers to stay in often dangerous and unsafe places while awaiting their asylum hearings. And then you have the third order, which requires agencies to do what they call a top-to-bottom review of recent regulations, policies, and guidance that have set up barriers to our legal immigration system. Notably here, that will also include a review of Trump's public charge rule, which prevented immigrants from getting green cards if they used or were likely to use government benefits such as subsidized housing. And so, if you haven't been keeping count, with these 3 new orders under his belt, Biden will have implemented 9 executive actions just on immigration in his first 2 weeks. And while yes, these actions all fulfill campaign promises Biden made to reverse Trump's immigration agenda, you also have many activists and advocates expressing concerns that the steps that he has taken so far will not provide enough immediate action. But also at the same time, experts have said that this exemplifies the difficulties that Biden faces in unraveling the tons and tons of individual policies that Trump put into place. And those policies and roadblocks run deep. I mean, just yesterday, it was reported that a whistleblower accused the former acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security of actively seeking to limit Biden's immigration agenda. This by striking a series of last-minute agreements with the union for ICE. This including reportedly giving the ICE union unprecedented veto authority in many areas. And so with all that, in part, is why we saw senior Biden administration officials telling reporters that rather than focusing on just immediate changes, they want to give relevant agencies time to evaluate how to best undo all these Trump policies. And so this is something that we're going to have to keep our eyes on for a while. One, to see what the agencies find from these reviews, what's happening there, as well as what continues to happen with immigration, the number of people seeking asylum. Right, so we'll see what develops there. Also, another situation that we're seeing daily developments. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene. For example, in a statement yesterday, we saw Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell deliver a scathing condemnation of Greene. Now, notably, in his statement, McConnell never explicitly named Greene, but he did mention several absolutely insane conspiracy theories that she has openly supported and promoted, which made it clear that he was talking about her. With McConnell saying, "Loony lies and conspiracy theories are cancer for the Republican Party and our country." Somebody who suggested that perhaps no airplane hit the Pentagon on 9/11, that horrifying school shootings were pre-staged, and that the Clintons crashed JFK Jr.'s airplane is not living in reality. This has nothing to do with the challenges facing American families or the robust debates on substance that can strengthen our party. And whether you like McConnell or not, I personally do not, his remarks are significant here because they mark the first time he has weighed in on the criticisms facing Greene. Though, I would also argue it should be incredibly easy because she is a special kind of destructive crazy. Also, just a note, when we talk about McConnell doing what appears to be just sane things, understand this is not part of the Mitch McConnell image redemption tour. No, he's still Mitch McConnell. He may not be Frankenstein to Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene's Frankenstein's monster, but he is, let's say, the town sheriff who's like, I don't know what the Frankenstein's monster has been doing. Frankenstein's monster tweeted what? I'm sorry, I don't have Twitter. I have a disease that makes it so I don't see things that make what I'm trying to accomplish harder. But back on track, Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? McConnell says these things, which it's incredibly horrifying that she has supported and believed these things. Yeah, all of this is being talked about after tons of fairly recent social media posts surfaced last week showing her endorsing calls to execute Democrats and FBI agents, as well as directly posting countless bonkers conspiracy theories, including one where she claimed the California campfire was a vast Jewish conspiracy set by California politicians and PG&E using a secret space laser in order to clear a path for a high-speed rail, which is why, one, you probably saw the Jewish space lasers was trending on Twitter last Thursday, and two, I agree with the S.T.A.L.K.E.R brothers that Jewish space lasers would be a fantastic band name.
I need to get the artist on that, actually.
But despite all that, until McConnell's speech, a lot of what has been said has been very soft. Right, we've seen House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy calling Greene's comments deeply disturbing, saying that he'll meet with her. But so far, he's reportedly not met with her, but instead given her key committee assignments that included the Education Committee, a move that obviously sparked backlash. Are people wondering, how is a woman that doesn't believe believe in mass school shootings and has been out there harassing people like David Hogg. How is she expected to decide education policy? And so as a result, we saw House Democrats saying yesterday that they would unilaterally advance a measure to strip Greene of her committee assignments if McCarthy does not act. Now, Greene, for her part, responded to both McConnell's remarks and the Democrats' efforts to remove her from committees in a series of tweets, writing, "The real cancer for the Republican Party is weak Republicans who only know how to lose gracefully," with her also seeming to threaten Democrats if they remove her by saying the precedent they set will be used extensively against members on their side once they regain the majority after the 2022 election. And then, of course, using this whole situation as a way to fundraise. Though, if I could say anything to Democrats here, it would be, I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene needs precedent to do things that screw over people that do not support her crazy. Like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is what evil scientists made, so by comparison, Donald Trump seems like a sane, rational, functioning adult. But yeah, that is that's where this one ends. And of course, with this story as well as, hey, if any other stories stood out, I'd love, of course, to know your thoughts in those comments down below. But that is where I'm going to end today's show. As always, thank you for being a part of my daily dives in the news, hitting that like button, subscribing, all the good stuff. If you need some more D in your life, I had to do it at least one time. Say it one time. If you need more DeFranco in your life, maybe you missed the last show or something, you can click or tap right there for more me. But yeah, that is where I'm going to end today's show. I love your faces, and thanks for watching news that matters for people that care. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here. Every episode of Mindfield is now free to view all over the world. All 24 episodes, all 3 seasons. Whew, it is really exciting. And it's why I've invited you here to Vsauce headquarters. Why watch Mindfield alone when you could watch it with me and some of the researchers, writers, scientists, and teachers who are in the episodes who made Mindfield what it is? That's right, we are about to have ourselves a Mindfield marathon. We're going to watch 3 episodes in their entirety, pausing throughout to talk more deeply about the concepts in the episodes. It's going to be very exciting, and it's all going to happen right in here. Follow me. After you. We're going to begin with an episode that helped new research happen and improved the lives of some very special children. Season 2, Episode 6, The Power of Suggestion. This is McGill University in Montreal, Canada. It boasts an enrollment of more than 40,000 students from 150 countries. The campus employs 1,700 professors teaching 300 programs of study, and it's proud to be home to 12 Nobel Prize winners. It is considered one of the finest research universities in the world. Recently, researchers at McGill have embarked on a study that uses a brain scanning device to read people's minds and implant thoughts into their heads. Or so their subjects think. Now, the same device may be able to help kids with ADHD, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, migraines, Tourette's, and more. This study is not about technology. The MRI machine behind me may look impressive, but it's a sham. It's deactivated, non-functioning. What this study is really about is faith in science. It's about the power of thoughts to heal. All you need is the power of suggestion. A placebo is something that shouldn't work, but due to the power of suggestion and because of the strength of our belief, does. But we don't fully understand yet how they work. There could be an evolutionary explanation. For example, if a small child hurts themselves, negative symptoms like pain and crying can be good. They keep the child safe and still, while signaling adults to come help. When help arrives, even if it has no active effect, the child's brain may feel it has permission to redirect resources away from seeking help and on to actually healing. Modern medicine has found a way to harness this power by prescribing placebos. But not all placebos work the same. For example, a sugar pill will help your headache more if given to you by a doctor than by a poker buddy. And the color of the placebo matters too. A blue pill will work to make you feel calm better than a white pill, because blue is a more calming color. And a red pill will keep you awake and give you more energy than a blue pill will. A capsule will work better than a pill because it looks more important. And we're gonna stop right there because one of my guests already has a comment. Let me first introduce who the guests are. Daniel Toker is a PhD candidate at Berkeley who has been writing and researching for Mindfield at least season 2 and 3.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the Fear episode, season 4.
And the Fear episode, which isn't even out yet, but it might be by the time you watch this, in which case, it's out already. Thanks, Daniel. On the far right side, we have Elizabeth S.T.A.L.K.E.R, who worked on season 3 as a producer, writer. She's a science communicator, science documentary filmmaker. But I saved the middle for last because Dr. Samuel Vessier from the Culture, Mind, and Brain Lab at McGill University, one of the co-directors, is here, and he's also going to be featured quite prominently in this episode. You'll see him soon. And he is the one who told me, stop, let's talk, because we're gonna talk about placebos. And I just mentioned in the episode that the color of a pill affects how it can make you feel. A blue pill will tend to be more calming because so many of us associate blue with calming. However, we need to put a star on so many of us.
Yeah, so reportedly in Italy, blue pills don't have a calming effect because people associate the color blue with the soccer jersey of the national soccer team. So they tend to associate it with a kind of a feeling of arousal and not calmness. So it's interesting to try to parse out, the different effects of some colors. Red seems fairly universal as something that triggers high arousal, but not blue.
Is that because red is the color of blood, you think?
I'm really not sure. I mean, as you know, we seem to have some inbuilt attentional biases towards red, like say the little buzzing red lights on smartphones work really well that way because we tend to automatically attend to them. It could be blood, yeah, could be fire even, because we also have an attentional bias towards fire.
Right.
Wait, but how universal is this? Have studies looked at Papua New Guinea and populations there that don't watch the movies and don't have the stories that we have in America or in Europe? I mean, is this something that, you said inbuilt. Is it really?
I'm not aware of all the studies. I think red for sure is something for which we have a relatively innate attentional bias. Red is processed as salient in the environment.
So much of it depends on the person. Like, there could be a person here in America for whom red is really calming because of their particular circumstances.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I just got back from China yesterday. So I flew in, and one of the things you notice, even from the sky looking down over Chinese cities, is how much red lighting there is, like red LEDs. And so I associate red with stop. Like if red, it's meant to catch my attention, it's sort of alarming. But in China, actually, it's ubiquitous, and it's more just like a color of good luck. Most restaurants have their, the title of the restaurant in red. So it's also meant to catch your attention, to stimulate arousal, but in less of like a negative way that it can sometimes be here in the United States. The red street sign isn't necessarily going to be.
So probably the emotional valence is conditioned and culturally contingent on some level, but that red is going to be salient, is going to be something that we kind of automatically attend to. That's fairly universal.
And once we attend to it, how we feel may depend a lot on the culture that we're from.
Right.
But I think the point is that even things like the color and size and shape of a pill and who gives it to you will affect how it works. It's not just the chemical properties of the medicine. There's so much more, so much in the mental world.
Well, I mean, but that also is chemical, ultimately, right? Because if it's a blue pill or a red pill, that's going to affect your neurochemistry in some way.
And you know what? Why is it red or blue? Because of the physical shape of the molecules,
Right.
The shape.
Right.
Wow. So, right. I guess this is going to be a question I want to keep coming back to. How do we really define a placebo? Because I think in the episode I say something like there's no active ingredient that should cause that effect, but yet if a pill is calming because it happens to be blue, because its molecular structure reflects blue light the best, then there is something chemically in that pill that works in calming you. And it's not because the ingestion helps, it's just the color alone.
Right, right. I guess it's easier to define what's not a placebo as something that works better than a placebo.
Well, that's why another term for placebo effects are non-specific effects or non-specific factors. So whatever factors involved in healing that we cannot attribute to the chemical substance that is targeted in the treatment. And there are also non-specific effects in psychotherapy even that are, so tone of voice, setting, waiting times. So placebo is really a filler term for all these different psychosocial, symbolic, ritual factors that we don't fully understand, but that we know contribute to a cure somehow.
Right. So those are called non-specific.
Non-specific.
The specific ones, how are they defined? They are...
So the specific one would be the actual analgesic property of a pill, for example, that's been well studied in RCT. We know it produces that effect. But then we know that there are other effects around and beyond that also contribute to healing. And in the case of an actual placebo procedure where we know that specific molecule is not actually present in the pill, but healing will still happen, then we need to investigate those different effects, those different factors that are non-specific.
Maybe this works. A non-specific, non-placebo effect of a medicine would be what works even when it's administered to someone in a coma who doesn't know what's happening, doesn't know who's administering it, but we know that that molecule in the blood causes blood pressure to go down or whatever, causes pain to be felt less, I don't know.
But be careful because there are placebo effects have been found, for example, in nonverbal autistic children who for sure cannot understand the nature of the suggestion. Because, of course, if you have some kind of an idea about a therapeutic target and a mechanism of action, so I have a headache and this one pill removes the headache, then that will greatly help in the placebo effect. But what about the case of autistic nonverbal children who have no idea, who don't expect anything, and yet there's an effect? There's a socio-cognitive component to placebo effects. You have to be able to expect what other people expect of you, even implicitly. So probably in the case of the nonverbal autistic children, it's also, say, the reassuring tone of voice of the parent's shifted expectations, the sort of contagious hope that might work. And the same mechanism, same social mechanism might be involved in dogs and in advanced social species through observation and kind of social emotional contagion.
Very cool. All right, guys, let's get back into the episode. You ready? Here we go. Also, an injection will work better than a capsule because it seems more serious and potent. There's even evidence that fake or sham surgeries have positive effects. It may be fake medicine, but the effects can be real. And not just because the patient feels better psychologically. We're talking real physical healing, thanks to the power of the brain.
So again, briefly, can I say something, Michael?
Yeah, let's stop.
Well, I'm really glad you're pointing out all these different dimensions of placebo effects. The take-home point here is that the more elaborate the procedure, the better it works. And by elaborate, I mean so technologically elaborate, but also motivationally elaborate. So if it hurts a little bit, if you have to wait a long time for it, if it seems really symbolically prominent also, so whatever prestige might be attached to a procedure, that'll tend to work better, and also socially elaborate. So if you can notice improvements in other people, preferably people like you, people from your in-group, you can talk to them, that'll also help prepare you for the placebo response.
It's amazing. It makes it feel like, why even study real medicine when so much of just the way people think about it can make a difference? Clearly, there are limits to that. And I want to revisit that when we start looking at the actual study that we did in this episode, because talk about making it feel technologically interesting. We've got a whole film crew there. Why would a film crew be here unless it's going to work well? We'll talk about that soon. We'll get right back into it, the power of suggestion.
I traveled to Montreal to meet local children struggling with debilitating behavioral and neurological conditions, who would soon find out whether their afflictions could be cured by the power of suggestion.
This is Malaya.
Malaya, I'm Michael. Nice to meet you.
12-year-old Malaya suffers from a common skin ailment, eczema, but she has also developed a skin picking disorder, dermatillomania.
And you're starting high school, what, like this year?
Early September.
Wow, that's a big step. So what kind of things like worry you, given the symptoms that you have?
Probably the picking.
Of your skin?
Yeah, I don't know. I find it satisfying to pick. It's kind of gross.
Why do you think you can't stop?
I'm not sure.
Have you tried different things that'll help you stop?
Yeah, like in my mind, I'm just like, today you won't pick. You are gonna get rid of this eczema, and then after I'm just like, oh wait, my face is like bleeding.
Yeah,
And
is
then-
it embarrassing?
Yeah, I like to wear long sleeves because my arms are like, if they're really bad, I'm gonna try to wear long sleeves.
How are your arms now?
It's like really bad. So, as you can see.
And that's all just from scratching and picking?
Yeah.
12-year-old Nicholas was troubled by debilitating migraine headaches.
So what do you want to be when you grow up?
Like I really, really want to be probably like an NHL or an MLB player, one of those two.
Nicholas's love of sports is unfortunately also the original source of his suffering.
Nice.
My first head injury, which was a concussion, I hit my head on a soccer post. And then I hit my head in a game of hockey. After that, I had headaches every single day. I was throwing up, having auras. They're like colors that you see before you have a headache. I wasn't able to go to school. And then we went to the hospital and then to their concussion program.
Can I see his migraine chart?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have almost 2 years worth. Severe headaches here. Severe
Every
migraines.
day?
Every single day. This has turned his world upside down.
Nathan was diagnosed with ADHD and impulse control disorder.
I'd love to hear, especially about you, Nathan. First of all, how old are you?
9.
9.
How old you are?
How old do you think I am?
30.
That's a very good guess. I'm 31.
Ooh.
So tell me about like before Nathan's diagnosis, what were kind of the symptoms you were seeing?
Tantrums all the time. Just an inability to reach him, to communicate to him, to connect to him. That was the main symptom.
And what did you think of this, Nathan? Were you like, why are my parents not happy?
Because I was not listening.
Why weren't you?
I don't know. Maybe because I had problems.
And as far as like behavior?
Impulsivity, hyperactivity. You're always on the edge. You're always stressed. What is he gonna touch? Where is he gonna go? What is he gonna do?
These families had tried conventional methods to treat their children with little success. But they were about to find out whether their symptoms could be alleviated using an accessory-assisted placebo, a fake non-functioning MRI machine. This groundbreaking study of the power of suggestion in action is the brainchild of pioneering researchers at McGill University's esteemed RAS lab.
We study a whole bunch of different mind-body interaction topics: suggestion, hypnosis, placebo effects. Anytime the mind is regulating the body or vice versa, that's a topic that we study.
Now you said the word placebo, and the device that we are using is a sham scanner. Tell me about the scanner.
What we do with the MRI scanner is we stack so many different layers of deception. In their head, this is a proper neuroscience study done at the Neurological Institute, and that's why we wear lab coats. That's why we have all of this scientific-looking equipment. By the time they actually started the study, they've already in their mind built up all these different layers of credibility. They really believe that what we're doing is real.
What's interesting is that children, they're not immune to the power of neuroenchantment.
Neuroenchantment?
Neuroenchantment.
What does that mean?
So it's this idea that there is some kind of medical magic. There is immense power that is attached to the culture of neuroscience, whereby neuroscientific props and accessories have more healing power, more physiological effects, because culturally people believe that they do. I mean, the same kinds of cultural cognitive mechanisms are at play in religious systems. So here we are praying to the gods of neuroscience and biomedicine.
Talk to me about the ethics of lying.
The work we do with children actually does not involve lying. We tell them at first that everything that they see and everything that we do in the lab is a suggestion. We explain to them that suggestion is a way to tap into the power of their mind. And we keep emphasizing, even as they go in the scanner, that it is their mind and their brain that is doing the healing, that they're basically reprogramming their own brain.
The parents knew that the scanner was a placebo, but for the study to work, the children had to believe in the procedure. So before they visited the lab, I enlisted a few YouTuber friends to help raise their expectations.
Hey guys!
Today, we have a huge surprise for you about something brand new in science that could affect you today.
Oh, I know them.
Well, today we learned about this amazing new machine that teaches kids' brains how to heal super fast.
We really hope that you get the chance in person to see how this machine works.
With a little help from the machine, you can focus better, you can be more confident, and it can even take away some headaches.
Awesome. Not too many people get the chance to have this awesome experience, but we hear the scientists in Canada.
I'm going to have it?
Yeah, and it's very cool. So what do you hope the machine allows you to do, or makes you better at?
Better at concentrating, better at focusing.
I want to heal faster, and this probably be a good idea.
All right, so I want to talk about a couple of things. One, this episode is really different from a lot of Minefield episodes because we're treating people in it, and we're following their stories. A ungenerous way to look at this is that in this episode, we're lying to children and performing fake medicine on children. Dr. Messier, what are your thoughts?
So if you carefully examine what we say, it is correct that we never tell a lie, that we explain the mechanism correctly. However, to be completely honest, we do probably rely on the children's, to some extent, uncritical faith in the healing power of the machine on the one hand and their own brain. And this is because we know it is very effective for people to be able to relax their worries and their critical thinking and to surrender to some kind of an idea that they have of an external locus of control. Now, note here how both the brain and the machine are basically an agency other than their conscious self. So we tell them, you know, the machine will help your brain heal itself. It is your brain that is doing the healing. But it is much more efficient for the children to at least initially believe that the machine has some kind of special power.
I think I even remember you telling me that you would tell the parents flat out, the machine's not even plugged in.
Absolutely.
And then the next day that they came in, they would say, but is this safe? Because how can it be safe? We're in the basement of a neuroscience lab and this machine is really big and noises are being played.
Not even that, they would ask, so did you find out what's wrong with my child's brain? They wanted us to comment on neuroimaging results and we would have to, you know, pull them aside again and say, do you remember, we're not doing actual neuroimaging, you know, we're not even competent to comment on findings that are not even there. They would forget.
They would forget.
They would forget because all the cues are in place, and I think it would demand so much mental effort to remember that this is sham, that people revert to a kind of adaptive self-deception. So this is also what we're aiming for. We're aiming to tap into the children's ability to self-deceive, which we know can be very effective. Like say, if you're really, really nervous before giving a talk and then you manage to convince yourself that you're not nervous, then lo and behold, you start feeling confident. Now, initially, there might have been some self-deception, but then if the results are good, then it's no longer deception.
This is what I really love about all the episodes and all the work that we've done together. Because we also worked on the reverse exorcism, putting a spirit in someone. That, okay, in a way, we're almost finding some truth to pseudoscientific practices. If I have some mental block or some behavior I don't want, and you know, my mother takes me to a person who prays to crystals and whatever, that crystal has no chemical mechanism with which to help me. However, if I truly believe that this is significant and I notice that I'm being cared for, that people care so much, and I think so much more about my behavior because of all of that, I can actually get better. And that's what we're doing here, but instead of using crystals and whatever, we're using science-looking stuff. Lab coats and an MRI and imaging of brains on the computer screens around, and it just feels like this must be serious and real. But in reality, they may as well be laying on a bed while someone sings nonsense words to them.
And I like the parallel that you draw. It's true that a lot of spiritual healing practices, they draw on this, you know, these transitional objects, you could call them, so things like amulets or stones or rocks or even magic, you know, crosses that people can sort of attribute healing power to without having to worry. It becomes a convenient way to instill hope in people.
All right, well, let's get right back into it.
I hope it heals me with my concussions, and now I hope my headaches go away.
I was about to take part in something remarkable, the very first use of accessory-assisted suggestion on children with these kinds of symptoms. Mindfield would play an integral role in the study, and the results could be new and significant for science. On the day of the first session, several measures were put in place to heighten the children's neuroenchantment.
Nathan.
A friendly fake nurse. A walk down a long, impressive hallway. And a 10-minute anticipation-building wait outside the lab. Then it was time for their first scan.
Shall we?
While the hypothesis of this study was grounded in science, this was Dr. S.T.A.L.K.E.R and Jay Olson's first time testing their theory on real children with real disorders, and they didn't know if it would work.
You may lie down if you'd like.
I have a question. So it seems to me that placebos work in part because these subjects have a lot of faith in medical science. Did you study that at all or ask them at all about that? I mean, and I guess my question is, for somebody who's very skeptical of medical science, who doesn't feel like doctors are working to their benefit, would they still be as susceptible to a placebo?
Well, a lot of people might say they're critical of medical science, but for example, if they have acute appendicitis, their first intuition will be to rush to the ER. And for a belief to be really effective, it needs to be culturally widespread. And we happen to live in a historical moment where most of the solutions to our everyday, ailments are deemed to be found in medicine. And children are receptive to these kinds of cues, even implicitly, even if they don't know that they know. So I think, try it out at home, for example, if you have like a 5-year-old niece, show her a picture of a builder and then a doctor with a stethoscope and ask your niece, which one is the smartest? For sure, they're gonna point to the doctor because they've picked up on a cultural consensus that this is where, elaborate knowledge lies. At the same time, I'm not aware of any studies testing medical placebos on people who are really skeptical of medicine, who are completely into alternative medicine. It may be that it wouldn't work with them. I think it's a good hypothesis.
Also, is there such a thing as an anti-placebo? And what I mean by that
Oh, no,
is
placebo, for sure.
Yeah, okay. So that's like somebody who's skeptical. So even something that's potent, even if you give them a potent drug, they don't react to it because they're so skeptical
yeah, right.
about
That's
it.
another thing. Nocebo's something different. What is that, though? Where because of all the non-specific crap surrounding a chemical mechanism that should work, it works less well because of the context.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And it may be that people who are a little too high in analytical reasoning, people who are not very suggestible, people who are not very prone to social influence, may also reverse placebo themselves inadvertently because they're too critical, because they can't let the self-regulatory magic happen. But it could be that at the social level, our naive beliefs in some things like, say, some categories of illness that may not be scientifically very validated, but just because people believe they have these symptoms, like, say, certain food intolerances or certain allergies that appear to be on the rise, well, there are some psychogenic factors involved in that, and that might have something to do with collective nocebo effects. And the next problem is also letting people know that they're genetically at risk for a particular condition sometimes may trigger the symptoms or may even trigger the condition in a way that not knowing might have been better.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is often bliss.
Like it's very ethically tricky then.
It's very ethically tricky because you have to tell people, but then there are also risks associated with telling.
That's why you might not want to do a personal genetics test.
Right.
Well, we're about to test that in the lab as well because we think there's interesting neuroenchantment effects associated with belief in genetics. So we're about to do a study with sham personalized feedback. So sham, swab and genetic. And it's basically like a pain nocebo condition as well where, it's a placebo analgesia condition. So we give people a shock and pain and we tell them that in one condition, we've tailored the machine to one particular genetic polymorphism that they have, and we fully expect that it's going to work better in that condition, but we haven't tested it yet. And then eventually, one of our dreams is to also test in a kind of a 3-arm trial to do sham neuroimaging versus sham genetic testing to see which one has the strongest effects.
What's your hypothesis? Which do you think we as a society believe more in, neuroimaging or genetic testing?
I'm really not sure. I think we're moving towards believing more in genetic testing, but the belief might still be culturally new, whereas belief in the power of neuroscience are very well installed culturally. We're more than 2 decades after the decade of the brain. So I would say in 10 years, it'll probably be genetic testing. For now, it depends on levels of exposure. But for sure, like say for children, the idea of a gene is still very, very opaque, very nebulous, very esoteric, whereas putting them in this enormous machine in this authoritative hospital might
always be better than just swabbing their mouth and telling them something. Let's get back into the episode. You guys ready? Okay, here we go.
One of my roles was to help build up the children's belief that it would work.
As you go into the machine, you'll relax more and more. Would you like to relax slowly or quickly today?
I could go in quickly.
Quickly?
Oh, wow, nice.
Very good.
Although the MRI scanner was completely deactivated, we needed the kids to believe it was fully functional. So Jay played a series of realistic sound effects to signify that the machine was working, while Dr. S.T.A.L.K.E.R planted the suggestion that it would help the patient heal.
You might notice some unusual feelings, perhaps a tingling. Your brain is continuing to learn and to heal and to help you find this constant feeling of confidence.
If all went well, the placebo effect of the sham brain scanner would convince the children's conscious minds that real neuroscience was at work.
A deep, deep breath.
This would allow their subconscious minds to harness the power of their brains to heal themselves.
For people with migraines, it's often in the front or the back part of the head, but it could also be like a feeling like outside the head. So I'm not sure what it's going to be like for you. We'll find out afterwards. So we'll now slide you in.
Cool, it's like a roller coaster. I love roller coasters.
The deeper you go in, the more you'll relax.
Okay, I want to go all the way deep. I feel more stronger beeps.
I know. This is because you're already at level 3. You might notice a deeper feeling of relaxation.
Yes, I can feel it. Can we go a little bit deeper, please?
Yes.
Oh, my whole entire feet. Nice.
The scientists at McGill believe the children's brains have always had the ability to control their symptoms. The children just needed to believe it themselves.
Yeah, so the beeps can sometimes make people sneeze as a sign that they're relaxing just very deeply. Right.
Very well.
You did very, very well, Nathan.
The children all appeared to enjoy the procedure, and the researchers and I did our best to reinforce their neuroenchantment.
So when you heard the first set of beeps and the second set of beeps, did you notice feeling them in different parts of your body?
Well, the first time I went in the machine, I kind of felt it here.
Okay, good.
What level was she taken to today?
Level 2.
Level 2?
Yeah, level 2 is great, yeah.
Yeah.
When I was in the machine, I felt like I was going like backwards and forwards.
Okay, that's very good. That's a very good sign. You might have noticed how you were yawning.
Honestly.
That's great.
For a kid with hyperactivity, Nathan was already appearing calmer. But before our young subjects left the lab, Dr. S.T.A.L.K.E.R bolstered the suggestion that today's session would help them continue their healing process.
So I know for sure that you're going to be more relaxed, much, much less anxious. I would not be surprised at all if the scratching really diminished to no scratching at all. The amazing thing about the brain is that it has this fantastic power to heal itself. But now what we've been able to do here with the power of suggestion is to get your brain to work faster and better all the time. So how do you feel?
Amazing.
Oh, nice.
Mindfield provided the Raz Lab with Octopus by Joy smartwatches.
Lefty rules.
They were specially programmed to remind the children in between visits that their brain was healing itself.
just having the watch with you will make you feel better. But it's not the watch or it's not the machine that's making you feel good, it's your own brain.
Okay, I just stopped it because I want to say, at this time when this was filmed, smartwatches were like a whole cool brand new thing. Everyone was excited. The kids were like, oh, I get that. And we had to be like, it's not like an Apple Watch. It's just for your brain health, which is better. Tell me about the watches, because I don't think in the episode we focus enough on what their role was.
The idea was to work on placebo conditioning. So first we elicited a response in the scanner with a mixture of hypnotic suggestions and anticipations and all the effects that you showed. Now, once we've found a target response, like say relaxation or self-regulation in some other way, then we get the kids to expect that when they receive a little buzz from the watch, they're going to keep experiencing whatever effect we were eliciting. So usually respect, relaxation, focus, and so forth. So then we programmed different delivery schedules for the children where they would get a little buzz and a little friendly icon, and then it would remind them, oh, I guess I'm doing great. And then we had them come back after 2 weeks in the lab where I would decrease the delivery schedule of the buzzes because I didn't want them to become too addicted to them. And eventually, after a 3rd week, there would be no more buzzes. So they could play around with the icons because I didn't want them to rely on the buzzes. But then, yeah, as you point out, a lot of the kids still wanted to have the watch as a kind of a transitional object, like a little blankie, that helps you sleep, or an amulet, or a special ring that people have.
You may have heard us say a few times, ooh, you're at level 3. Yeah. Today you got to level 2. It's completely made up.
Yeah.
There were no levels. But yet the kids really read a lot into that.
And then they became more and more proud each time they went deeper and they surrendered themselves to the...
Of course they did, because no matter what happened or how they felt, they were told, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, really?
We were validating everything they felt.
Everything.
Was the level thing planned, or was that improvised on camera?
No, I think we improvised it on camera, and then we stuck to it because we saw that it worked really well.
Well, yeah, I just allowed Samuel to guide the whole thing. I sat there and I would just back him up. I'm wearing a lab coat as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I go, oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he would just, it was almost hard sometimes to not laugh, because he'd be like, yes, well, oh, you feel sleepy? Oh, that means you're very advanced. And I'd be like, he says that about everything. It was so funny. And I was always excited to see what level he would say they reached, because it gave me a sense of how much further you wanted to go with them.
Right. And because as you remember, we had many more kids than what we ended up showing on camera.
Yeah, let's talk about that,
and we
too.
had great results with all of them.
Right, so let's talk about that. So you see 3 children featured here in this episode, but I believe there were 7, 8, or 9 that we actually worked with.
There were 12.
There were 12, okay? Not all 12 could fit into the time constraints in that episode. That's partly why I want to have this marathon, so we can talk more.
You remember Mikey? Really, really hyper, really difficult to get him in the machine, and still there were lots and lots of improvements at home. He was able to take a shower for the first time. He made a friend at camp. And the watch in particular worked really well with him because he was very focused on it, and I made him work really hard to earn that watch. So by the time he got the watch, he was already going in the machine. He was calmer, he was more respectful to his dad.
And I think I remember the parents, the dad saying, okay, so we reached a point where your goal was to get the watch off the kid. That you don't need the watch after all. Your own brain, your own self can control this. But people really want those accessories. And the parents were like, well, I mean, could you tell them to keep it on? Because it keeps the kid calm and it makes them more thoughtful and it makes them more aware of their behavior.
You have kids, right? Do you use any of these tactics on your own kids?
Absolutely. Our very first subject was my son, Mateus, who suffered from chronic migraines. And we did a lot of work on him, and we had amazing results on his chronic migraines. Mateus couldn't make it in the final cut of the episode, but he also helped in the initial study as a child mentor, because we found that a lot of the kids were terrified of getting into the machine, but then if they could speak to another child who had gone through the procedure and who could talk about how fun and safe it was and how he'd gotten better, then we were able to have much better results. So we used this kind of peer mentoring strategy that we're still using, actually, in the studies that we're running now. But yeah, for sure, I use these kinds of tricks, and I give placebos to my children, you know, all the time.
And then you have your kids peddle the placebos to others. Because you're right, we don't show Mateos,
yeah.
We don't show Mateos in the episode, but he was there, and man, the kids believed him so much more than the adults. If he said, yeah, I get in there like every day, or whatever his schedule was, he was honest about all of this, and he was honest about the good results he was getting. Although, let's be very clear, this MRI is just a piece of plastic. It is not plugged in. It does not have the liquid helium and the magnets and anything. It's just plastic.
And Mateos, at the time he participated in the study, was still blind to the condition, meaning that he was still somewhat convinced that there was something to the machine, even though he understood the language, he understood the concept of suggestion, but there's a part of him that didn't want to think about that fully.
How can this only be a suggestion if I'm in the basement of a neuroscience lab with this big machine? Clearly, they're lying when they tell me the truth that this is a placebo. All right, let's get back into it. You guys ready? Here we go.
In 6 weeks, we would return to the lab to check in on their progress.
This high-tech contraption is pretty much what McGill University's first sham brain scanner looked like. It was an old, discarded hairdryer. But the patients didn't know that. In the original study, 56 undergraduate students were told that it was able to reduce pain, cause amnesia, influence sexual attraction, and produce various other impressive effects. The lab's new, more modern sham brain scanner shows even more promise. And I was invited to participate in its test on a whole new group of adult subjects.
Okay, so you can come in here and just grab a seat.
Yes.
These college students are fully aware of what's possible today with neuroscience. Could even they be neuroenchanted enough to believe in the impossible, that an MRI scanner could read their thoughts?
And we're looking at cutting-edge psychological research.
Okay.
Yes, it's part of the neural activation mapping project. We're going to be putting you in an MRI, so it's a modified one. It's called the CTMS fMRI.
Okay.
So combined transcranial magnetic stimulation, functional magnetic resonance imaging, which is a big word just meaning it can both read and influence thoughts.
All right. Okay.
So you'll be choosing a number from 10 to 99.
Okay.
And then from looking at your neural activation patterns, Dr. Vessier here will try to infer which number you're thinking of.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, great.
Most adults know the basics about MRIs, so we made sure to cover every detail.
In this scanner, the magnetism is a lot less.
Okay.
And it's good for the documentary team because it means they can bring cameras. So that said, we do have to remove the metal.
Got it. All this.
After this realistic but completely unnecessary step, it was time to begin our fake mind-reading experiment.
So we're going to start the calibration, so try to stay very still.
Of course, there was actually nothing to calibrate, but we were conditioning our subjects with the expected procedures, sights, and sounds of a real MRI study.
Okay, think of the number 1.
The subjects were asked to concentrate on the numbers 0 to 9, while the machine supposedly mapped parts of their brains.
Think of the number 9.
Dr. Vessier and I remained in character at all times, pretending to analyze the subject's brain activity. But the images on our screens were actually old MRI scans from former patients.
Is the calibration good?
Looks pretty good to me.
With our subject now primed, it was time to convince her that the scanner could identify a number she was thinking of by reading her mind.
You're going to choose a number from 10 to 99.
Okay.
You're going to hear a beep, then you'll hear a second beep. So you're always making your decision between the 2 beeps.
Okay.
Okay?
Got it.
So I'll slide you in. So hold on to that number for just a second.
Okay.
They're going to print it out and then we'll see.
Okay.
It was pretty clear.
We pretended to give Jay the results of the MRI's analysis, but actually Jay was about to add the subject's number to the document with a little sleight of hand.
Okay, so you can stay lying down just for a second. What was the number?
31.
31. Okay, cool. So if you can sit up here.
What?
So it's pretty close, but it's swapped, huh?
Yeah. Okay.
That miss was actually intentional, so the results didn't appear to be perfect, adding to the realism.
So you're doing well. We'll do another trial of this. The same thing. Okay. I'll slide you in.
Michelle thought of a new number. Would the scanner get it right this time?
Super clear.
It's clear.
Really good this time.
All right. They think the signal is clear. What
Okay.
was your number?
27.
27, did you say?
27.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if you can sit up here.
Yes. Oh, wow. What? I don't understand. Crazy.
So you chose 27.
Did.
And the technician thought 27
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How does that feel?
I didn't expect it to be so specific.
Yeah.
A lot of different areas in the brain could be lighting up just to think of the concept of a number.
What do you know? It worked. Thanks to the wonders of science, or rather, the skills of Jay, who, in addition to being a neuroscientist, happens to be a professional magician on the side. While Jay won't reveal the secret of the trick, the mind-reading illusion is very similar to the mentalist tricks that have entertained audiences for over a century. The only difference is that when audiences see the stunt performed in a magic setting, they think it's a great trick, not real science.
The machine had 89.
That's cool.
However, in the impressive scientific setting of the Raz Lab, these subjects thought our magic trick was real science.
Oh my God.
They didn't realize that the real science they were experiencing
It's pretty cool.
was the power of suggestion.
Oh, wow.
A dose of neuroenchantment this powerful can make for a formidable and effective placebo.
I want to talk about the physical sensations.
Sure.
What was your experience?
It felt like a headache was coming on. It sort of felt like tingling through my head.
Where?
Just through this area. Like this
Okay.
whole area felt more like full. I felt like a sort of a pressure or something like that. It was a strange feeling.
So this-
Like back here a little bit.
In the back?
Yeah, a little bit in the back.
Somewhere in the back of the head, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Some tingling inside my head.
Okay.
I want to hear what it felt like to have your mind read.
That was very strange. I think I was probably skeptical, like going into it, and then I couldn't figure out as I was thinking, like how that would happen otherwise. And so I'm just, I think, in a baffled state.
Yeah.
It was time to clear up this baffling mystery.
So, some deception has been going on today. Dr. Olson is not reading your mind. Neither is this machine. This machine is deactivated.
Wow.
All the
Okay.
noises were coming from a speaker.
It was an illusion. Oh my God.
That's pretty cool.
Dr. Olson is not reading your mind. The sounds you're hearing are not magnets, it's just from a speaker. The machine in there is actually deactivated. It's not working.
Wow, it's like placebo.
Yeah.
So
That's exactly what it is. Now imagine tapping into this power for other effects, like healing, for example.
Right. Wow. I definitely believe the placebo effect is alive and well.
All right, so we just saw adults being fooled and certainly lied to. However, the cool thing is that while we punked the adults, we used that same phenomenon for good with the children. And we don't deceive the children. We just allow them to deceive themselves. I still don't know how the magic trick is done. And I never asked because it's his trick, not mine to know. But when the participants said the number they were thinking of, he managed to somehow get it written on that sheet in the time it took him to be like, yep, that's what it said. And it was phenomenal. And then to hear people say, oh yeah, no, I felt tingling, my head felt full. It's like, you were just laying on a bed. Nothing was on, nothing was happening. It's all in your imagination.
Well, a little behind the scenes here, you might remember that there was a second condition to that experiment where we implanted numbers in people's heads. So once, we get them to believe that the machine reads their mind, so their minds are blown, and then we inserted numbers in their head. So one of the guys, you might remember, said, you know, I thought of the number 45. I hate the number 45. I would never myself have picked that number. The number was just flying into my face. And so it's in that second condition that a lot of them reported, you know, kind of weird feelings like tingling and headaches.
That's right. I totally forgot. It didn't even make it into the episode. But we also said now that we can read your mind, we are going to implant thoughts into your mind. You are going to have a number put into your head. You'll close your eyes and a number will appear that we have put there. And of course, we use the same sleight of hand trick to convince them that that's what happened. Whatever they thought they had, thought was what we wanted them to think. And obviously, that's crazy. Like, that could be abused so much. But yet we convinced neuroscience postdocs that we were able to do it.
And you might remember we were toying around with doing, like, just improvising a third condition where we make people speak or, like, say things, or we induce the symptoms of Tourette's. And in retrospect, if we had done that, say, in the behavior, in the reverse exorcism episode, remember, like, we were able to induce all kinds of weird feelings, like even an out-of-body experience, but we couldn't really get people to speak. We couldn't get the spirit to speak through their mouth. But if we had taken them through like 2 steps like this to really convince them that this machine is doing something, then we could have gotten participants to do all kinds of wild things.
Yeah, we ran out of time, but I remember that day you were like, let's just go out on the street, recruit people to come in. I can get them to say bad words and think that it's being like they're a puppet of the machine.
Is that related to hypnosis?
Yeah,
yeah, of course.
Absolutely. It is hypnosis. It's accessory, ritual-assisted hypnosis.
I think that hypnotism is often seen, well, at least I can speak for myself, as nothing but a trick, right? I know that there are cases where it's used clinically. Is it all placebo, though? I mean, what are you really doing when you hypnotize someone? And they need to be susceptible to it.
Have you ever been hypnotized?
No, I think I could respond to being hypnotized like this, because while I don't have a lot of faith in, ooh, hocus pocus, hypnotize-y, instead, I will be like, this is an MRI. You're wearing a lab coat. Whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen.
Yeah, so is hypnosis like placebo? That depends what you mean by placebo. But if what you're asking is hypnosis tapping into some, say, autonomic resources that we typically don't have access to volitionally, effortfully, then yes. So getting people to somehow relax their hypervigilance and being able to tap into or elicit physiological responses that they themselves could not induce voluntarily, yes. And I think you're correct. The ritual of the induction ritual of, you know, surrendering to a set of suggestions about falling into trance, that's a kind of a culture-bound ritual that works for some people, that may not work for others. But I think that anyone can be hypnotized as long as you find the right set of what we would call epistemic cues. So you tap into the kind of knowledge, the kinds of things that they're likely to believe in as being authoritative, then you can definitely get people to relax their critical thinking. And
so I'll say I've actually been hypnotized before, and I was very, very skeptical going in. And as the hypnotist was telling me, like, oh, when you open your eyes, you're gonna forget the number 3. I remember thinking to myself consciously, like, there's no way I'm gonna fall for this. And then he'd say, okay, now count to 10. And then I would get to 3, and then I would like pause. Even though I'm telling myself, like in my head, I'm saying like, I can say the number 3, but I just couldn't get it out.
Wow. I need to do this. I need to get hypnotized, because I've always seen it as just a party trick where I'm gonna make you bark like a dog on stage at a kid's birthday party, and they do, and I'm like, they're all faking it.
But you may not be susceptible. So from what I've read, there's like a pretty Gaussian distribution of susceptibility. So most people will fall for some things, but not all.
Right.
Some people will fall for nothing.
Some fall for all.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's interesting because it is a relatively stable psychological trait, and that's well studied. It doesn't change much throughout the lifetime, except in childhood. So between the ages of 7 and 14 is when people are more hypnotizable. And some people are, so we say they're highs or lows, high hypnotizables, low hypnotizables. And there is a normal distribution.
But it's really weird. Actually, I don't know if I'd recommend it. It was kind of an unpleasant experience to be hypnotized.
I've done more unpleasant things. I think I want to talk about that after this episode, kind of talk through some of the more uncomfortable and scary moments. But for now, let's just get right back into the episode, all right?
Yep.
Here we go.
There's evidence that the power of suggestion even works on animals. A study at North Carolina State University found that 86% of dogs receiving real seizure medication had a reduction in seizures, but almost as many, a full 79%, experienced the same effect from just a placebo pill. Now, we don't know how a placebo affects a dog's brain, but it could be that dogs have learned to associate vet visits and medicine from humans with feeling better. So giving them a placebo could help a dog's brain heal itself. Quick note, we recorded the scene with that dog so many times. There were so many takes. Were you there, Daniel?
I was there.
Oh, man. First of all, I don't think a lot of people don't know this, but all those rooftop scenes from season 1 and 2 were shot at night. We did a whole week of overnight shoots from 5 in the evening to 5 in the morning. And so I don't know what time of night that was, but we're
Like
all
3 in the
exhausted.
morning. The dog would climb up to you.
The dog would
looking for
jump on
cheese.
me. Yeah, it was hard to get the dog to wait, and the trainer was like, look, the dog doesn't understand its cue. It just knows that you're gonna give him cheese.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what you're saying. He doesn't know when it's a good moment. The dog was not a great actor. Shall we continue? Here we go.
So first I'll ask you to lie down again. And of course, you're a total pro at this.
For several weeks, the children had undergone sessions in the sham scanner at McGill University.
Your body continues to relax as we keep unleashing this healing energy.
Each time, they were reminded that through concentration and relaxation, they were helping heal their own brains.
Here we go.
Finally, after 6 weeks of receiving the placebo sessions, it was time to get a report on the results. Malaya suffered from anxiety and a compulsive skin picking disorder. Had she experienced any level of success? It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Go ahead and take a seat. You're wearing, like, not even, I thought maybe to have short sleeves on. You've just got a tank top on. Your arms look fantastic. They've really gotten better. And your face, I mean, all of it. Why do you think you're better?
I'm guessing it's the machine.
Yeah, what about it?
I'm not really sure how it works, but I'm picking a lot less. Sometimes if I see like a tiny flake, I'll just leave it there.
That's a pretty short amount of time for such a big change in the way you think and behave. That's awesome.
I don't really feel the urge to do it as much as I did before. So it's a big improvement, I guess.
Yeah, that definitely feels like and sounds like your brain being powerful.
It's obviously doing something because my arms are better.
Well, you seem a lot more confident, holding your head up higher. Would you agree, Anne-Marie?
Yes. She seems less anxious. She's more positive overall. I was hoping for this.
It's wonderful
more
to
than
see.
nice to see her that way.
Yeah. Well, good work. And as for Nicholas and his migraine headaches. Hey. It's good to see you again, Nicholas. Tell me about the procedure and how you felt afterwards.
It accomplished all the things that I wanted it to, and I haven't had a migraine at all.
That's awesome.
And concentration is a big thing that helped.
Wow. And can I see the symptom charts?
For sure.
So these go back to February.
Yeah, well, they're really telling.
And you can see, not good, lots going on,
Yeah.
but then recently, no migraines at all. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So now you said you went to the neurologist?
They thought it was quite remarkable. He hasn't needed any rescue medication. He hasn't needed the preventer, and he's not having migraines.
I'm actually really excited for high school.
Both Malaya and Nicholas attribute their improvements to the sham scanner. They believed it was working for them, and indeed it did. So how did Nathan, who suffered from ADHD and impulse control disorder, fare over the last 6 weeks? Well, I received a home video from Nathan's mother with an update on his progress.
So the best part about going through the treatment was just what it did to our son. We noticed a difference in Nathan immediately after the first session. And do you remember what happened?
I slept.
Yeah, he slept, something he doesn't do very often during the day. He slept for 2 hours. He was refreshed. It was just incredible to see. And then what happened was the entire summer we had him off the medicine, and he did great. He thought about stuff before he did it. We were able to talk things out, and it's been fun. So overall, we're very pleased, and you know, we had such a great experience, so thank you very much.
The children's results are encouraging, and a powerful sign of how effective suggestions and our willingness to believe them can be. In time, the kids will understand how all of the power was within them and not in the scanner.
This work is truly cutting edge. This hasn't been done before.
Correct. We also think of this as a great new way to do science and to collaborate.
So much more of the public will see what's being done.
Yes, science isn't just about publishing a paper that nobody reads. It's about spreading the ideas that you find.
100%.
As far as I'm concerned, you're already a co-author in our scientific experimental paper.
Wow, very cool. Thank you.
The children's improvements were caused by the placebo effect, and no deception was used to mask that. The parents knew the machine was deactivated, and the children were only told that it had the power to put a suggestion in their brain, a suggestion that ultimately came from themselves. But surely, the more people learn about placebos and their lack of intrinsic power, the less effective they'll be, right? No. Studies show that even when subjects learn that their treatment was a placebo, the positive results do not go away. What the subjects have learned about how to heal themselves remains with them. It was an honor to have been a part of this study. I think this is Mindfield at its best, using our resources to help researchers with their work and helping the public see how the brain is studied. Placebos can't fix everything, but these kids always had the power to start healing. All they needed was the power of suggestion. And as always, thanks for watching. All right, so that's the episode. Dr. Vessier, I have dismissed Elizabeth and Daniel so that we can talk one-on-one, honestly.
I miss them.
Do you feel the pressure? What are your thoughts now, 2 years after that episode?
Well, my thoughts are where to take this further, and so I'm thinking in lots of directions. One of them is practical. It's kind of unfortunate that the general public is really interested in this, but it's still hard to convince the scientific community and the clinical community that there's something worth pursuing there because it's so weird. So it's been difficult to get research funding. It's been difficult to get our research papers accepted for publication when we, try to present this particular project.
How do you do a control in a study on the effectiveness of placebo? Like, do you test it against a different placebo?
Yeah, and that's been one of the comments from reviewers when we try to submit this from publications, and I think it was a really good comment. They're asking, okay, so it seems you're doing this really cool, really amazing procedure. You're giving these kids a lot of attention, a lot of positive reinforcement, but what exactly works and what doesn't work? Is there anything in that intervention that is absolutely necessary or essential? For example, do you actually need the scanner? Could you just go and, give kids lots of positive suggestions about how they can use their hyperactivity to be really focused and strong, or could you use just a watch? So I can tell you something we're doing right now is we're beginning to test in a randomized trial just a watch versus just a machine to see if one of them works better.
Huh. Okay, that sounds really nice and like precise.
But precise or not, because even then there's so many other factors, as you know. So say the charisma or the reassuring tone of the experimenter. Like, I'm sure you're interested in the replication crisis in psychology, right?
Oh,
so one of the hypotheses is also that, well, it could be that some labs are trying to replicate a study. Well, the experimenters are just not as charismatic. They're just not as good or not as authoritative. And there's lots of other factors that are going on. And it's not just the mechanism itself that doesn't work, is that this one team is not able to reproduce it.
Man, it's so hard to control for all of those things. A bunch of different people need to run this, but they all have to have the exact same charisma. And every day, no matter what their mood is, different from day to day, it can't be. Because we really only want to look at watch versus machine when we know that the charisma can play such a big role.
Or also the setting of the study, is it in the hospital or is it like right now we're going to replicate it in a school? Because it turned out that logistically, now that Mindfield is not there to handle recruitment for us, then we just could not manage to bring all the participants in the hospital. And we have a contingent from a school, so it's a lot easier to do it there. And as such, we also have to use a simpler mock scanner.
Right. You know what? That brings up a big limitation of how Mindfield can help. Because if you said, okay, I've got a different experimental design that
I think is gonna work really well, but it's very similar. Could you do another episode that'll look almost exactly the same? I would love to, but I don't know if YouTube would pay for that. So, you know, I hope that Mindfield can at least bring what's being done and its importance to the public so that they know what to support and they know what to, I don't know, what kind of good things are being done and why it's important for us to have research institutions that are investigating things that might seem, I don't know, a little still fuzzy, but yet can lead to amazing discoveries. What are you working on that I don't know about that might be interesting for future episodes of Mindfield, of Vsauce? I know that you were working with tulpamancers. That's still going on? And if so, explain what that is.
Sure. So before talking about tulpamancers, we're also doing lots of stuff related to suggestion and placebo studies. So we're testing, like, say, fake Adderall, fake psychedelics. We're also...
Oh, fake psychedelics.
Fake psychedelics.
There's an episode in the first season of Mindfield where we give people a short-acting psychedelic and we have Confederates in the room that pretend like, whoa, everything's echoing. And sure enough, you can make people think they're tripping.
Absolutely, and we also use Confederates, just like you guys, and we had really good results.
So what are you specifically, like, what variables are you kind of tweaking and studying?
Well, we're also interested in the whole battery of non-specific psychosocial effects beyond the chemical properties of the substance themselves, including the particular cultural expectations that this psychedelic experience should yield these particular effects.
Right.
So we're looking at, you know, social proof, you know, social conformity, emotional contagion, but also, you know, testing, particular cultural beliefs. We're also going to be testing sham genetic testing to see how convincing that might be. And at some point, one of the dream is to compare that to sham neuroscience, so to see, you know, different kinds of neuroenchantment. So we're doing...
And then what's the point? Okay, so we learn that people are neuroenchanted and they're, I don't know, DNA enchanted. What's the word for that? Our faith in genetic research.
We think there are really big ethical implications, particularly when we start thinking about potential nocebo effects and culturally widespread nocebo effects. So genetic testing also generates a lot of anxiety. A lot of the times it's not done under proper, you know, clinical settings and clinical guidance, and people start worrying immensely because they have a particular gene that is thought to correlate with a particular condition, like, say, Alzheimer's, for example. And that can bring about all kinds of negative experiences, including sometimes perhaps precipitating early onset of diseases that may not otherwise have been triggered. So we think there's lots of important implications, particularly in terms of, you know, debunking dangerous pseudomedical and pseudoscientific ideas. So if we're able to demonstrate that there's a lot of authority, a lot of placebo and nocebo effects associated with, say, genetic testing, then we're better able to inform clinical practice, for example, or policy.
And the public to not be quite so enchanted by it and perhaps misled.
For sure.
Needlessly panicked. Wow, it's important stuff.
And so to answer your questions, yes, we're still working with tulpamancers. As you recalled, I did a cyberethnography years ago with just a little bit of psychological testing on these really cool, weird young people who conjure imaginary friends that they come to experience as basically as auditory visual hallucinations, except they're not crazy, and they report an increase in well-being in their life, even in social adjustment, as a result of having picked up the practice. So people want to say, well, they're crazy, they're hearing voices, and we think we're able to show that no, in fact, there's lots of contexts in which you can hear voices and be a very healthy person. So now, under the leadership of Dr. Michael Lifshitz and Dr. Tanya Lerman at Stanford University, we're in the process of doing neuroimaging of tulpamancers and comparing them also to evangelical Christians who speak in tongue.
Right.
And so we're interested in seeing what happens in the brain when either a spirit or tulpa sort of takes over and starts talking, and we're interested in the motor areas of the brain as well, and we want to see if something different is going on when, say, an agency other than a self, a tulpa or a spirit, is sort of in control.
Yeah, what does it look like in the brain when you aren't in control of your thoughts and behavior? Like,
right.
If we can tease out the difference, then are we literally finding, like, that is your agency, that is your consciousness, your will. And if it's gone, then you feel like you're possessed.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, brings us to our reverse exorcism episode, which you guys should all check out. Keep me up to date on what you're doing, because I really want to help in any way that I can, and you know, communicate all the cool work that you're doing. So, Dr. Messier, thank you.
It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Now we're going to turn to a darker topic. My own death. Should I die? Let's find out. Someday, I will die. But should I? If I was offered a longer life, I would take that in a second. But how long is too long? Is death something I should deny forever? Or is death and the role it plays in the universe something I am better off accepting? I want to start by looking at a particular way death affects how we live and treat one another. Terror management theory proposes that people like you and me manage the terror of death's inevitability by embracing cultural values. That the more aware a person is of their own mortality, the more vehemently they will enforce their particular views of the world onto others. Created by social psychologists Sheldon Solomon, Jeff Greenberg, and Tom Szynski, terror management theory, or TMT, suggests that often we are afraid of change because we're afraid of death. Each one of us has a worldview, a set of beliefs, customs, and norms we identify with that can live on after our physical bodies die. TMT suggests that rises in nationalism and prejudice are correlated with rises in the salience of mortality. That is, how present the inevitability of death is in people's minds. Now, this role that death plays fascinates me, and two of TMT's originators, Jeff and Sheldon, have agreed to work with me on a pilot study of terror management theory and real-life reminders of death. What's your hypothesis today?
Well, I think we're going to hope for the participants who are reminded of their mortality to be more punitive in their assessments.
See what happens.
Good morning.
For our study, we created a fake research center staffed by actors and invited participants to be a part of what they were told was a focus group about the criminal justice system. During the actual study, each group will hear a list of several different crimes that have been committed and will then be asked to propose a punishment for each offender with a severity level ranging from 1 to 7, with 1 being the most lenient and 7 being the most severe. The control group will simply enter the survey room and be asked to answer the questions. The experimental group, however, will first be exposed to reminders of their own mortality with strategically placed posters in the lobby. Also, the questionnaires they fill out will include questions about their own death. Decades of TMT research have shown that when presented with violations of common worldviews, those who are more aware of their own deaths will recommend bigger punishments for the crimes presented. But will our real-life reminders of death, not just the survey questions usually used, make a difference? Well, first, let's look at the control participants.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. There are no right or wrong answers. This is just about your gut level reactions. All right, let's begin. After raising millions of dollars in grant money to fund education for needy children, a fundraising manager unhappy with this life fled with all the money and was arrested months later in Tasmania, where he was living under a different name. So 1, least punishment, 3 months in prison. 7, most severe, 10 years in prison. Please answer now.
This is one that I think does have a
potential
worldviews on both sides. Yeah. That is a lot of 7s. If our control group is already maxing out like that, well then our scale has no room in that direction to show any effective mortality salience. Discovering issues like this, learning how to better isolate mortality salience's effect, is exactly what a pilot test is for.
Hey. Personal differences, huh?
An imposter with no medical training posed as a surgeon and bungled a minor operation to remove a child's tonsils. The patient recovered fully after additional treatment. 1 is 6 months on probation, 7 is 10 years in prison.
Okay.
If you are taking on the persona of a doctor, we would expect good behavior.
The surgeon botched the operation and was found to be under the influence of narcotics, causing her to have permanent hoarseness and ruining her career. A 16-year-old girl who had just received her license drove through a red light, hitting another car that was being driven by a talented pianist. A couple was taking their 2 children to the playground when they saw a woman sunbathing nude.
Look at that. There could be a gender gap. We're also learning a lot about the worldviews people have.
Yeah, absolutely.
An anti-government protester was arrested for spray painting profanities at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. 1, 40 hours
Wow,
of
she
community
went
service.
1 right
7,
away.
5 years in prison.
She's not a fan of authority and rules.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
All right, so here's the results and the mathematical analysis. These are averages per question. These are the averages and medians per participant.
Right. And the 4s are great, the 3 is great.
But this is grounds for optimism, at least.
7 was the max sentencing value, and our control group gave an average of 4.5.
I'm really happy with that as a control group.
Absolutely.
Now, our experimental groups. Remember, they will be seeing posters that remind them of their own mortality and will be asked different questions in their questionnaire. For example, please describe the emotions that the thought of your own death arouses in you. And write down, as specifically as you can, what you think will happen to you physically as you die. The point is to prime their mortality salience. Let's see if this group is more punitive towards worldview violations.
After raising millions of dollars to fund education for needy children, a fundraising manager fled with all the money and was arrested months later in Tasmania. 1, 3 months in prison. 7, 10 years in prison. Please answer now.
He's thinking about it.
Please hold up your answers. All right, thank you so much.
Ah, okay.
An imposter with no medical training posed as a surgeon and bungled a minor operation to remove a child's tonsils. 1, 6 months on probation. 7, 10 years in prison.
They are thinking a lot more.
Yeah.
A 10. I'm pretty sure she knows that 7
call
is
it a
the
7.
highest.
Yeah, we'll call it a 7.
It's
yeah.
funny to see when people feel bold enough, even though I'm like breaking the bounds and the rules of the task.
An anti-government protester was arrested for spray painting profanities at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C.
I really do appreciate the way they clearly seem to be taking a bit more time to deliberate.
Yeah. Okay, they can put the papers down and tell them that we will be in shortly.
Thank you so much. We've finished with this part of the study, so if you won't mind just hanging out for a moment, and our researchers will be in here in a moment to ask you a couple questions.
Let's find out if the reminders of mortality we showed our experimental group were salient enough.
Let me ask you about one thing out in the waiting room. Did you all notice the posters at all?
Yes, they are all death related.
Okay, all right.
I was surprised as soon as I walked in the door and I saw the gravestone. So
Yeah.
wonder what did I get into?
That's right.
So we are looking into something that's called terror management theory. And it's the idea that your own awareness of your mortality can affect the behaviors that you exhibit.
that we all manage the terror that we feel, knowing that we are mortal, by behaving in certain ways, especially in ways that reinforce our own worldviews, because we can kind of live on through the societies and cultures and identities that we have today.
Did any of you feel like you were still thinking a little bit about death when you came in here?
I was definitely going after people who transgressed against my worldview, to use your term. And yes, I noticed that. Yes, I was definitely doing that.
So this was incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It looks like our experimental stimuli were successful. They were salient, but they didn't cause the participants to think they were related to the study.
The control participants averaged about 4.5. The experimental participants were close to 4.7. So there's a slight tendency for the experimental people to be leaning in the direction that we predicted. But we're talking about relatively inconsequential differences.
That's right. It just makes me hungry to run more people.
Right.
And with the number that we had, that's statistically insignificant. Do you think that we did see any effects of mortality salience today?
I feel like the mortality salient groups tended to take a little longer before responding.
Yeah, me too.
And they seemed more thoughtful.
Yeah,
they seemed to put more effort into trying to do the right thing.
The difference was dramatic enough that we picked up on it.
Absolutely.
Although our stimuli might need to go through a couple more passes and some more vetting, we did find an interesting difference in the time it took for our groups to respond. Our control group took an average of 4 minutes and 46 seconds to decide on their punishments, but our experimental group took an average of 7 minutes, 18 seconds.
In a sense, that really is the prediction. The right thing by their own worldview, but by the same token, when we think about death, we want to do what's right. And if we're acting like jurors, we want to make the right decisions.
As we very much learned today, the goal isn't to prove one thing one way or the other, it's just to reduce uncertainty.
That's correct.
In the most careful way possible.
Absolutely, to know a little bit more today than we did yesterday.
Yeah.
Whew, okay, we have a lot to talk about, and luckily I've got just the person here with me to talk about all of this with, Judy Ho, a clinical neuropsychologist, tenured professor at Pepperdine. You run your own practice, you work with ethics a lot. What is your actual position?
So I'm the chair of the Institutional Review Board at Pepperdine University.
At Pepperdine.
Which is how we first started working together, because you were doing the trolley experiment, and that was an interesting thing to talk about.
Yes, if you have seen the trolley problem episode of Mindfield, you have seen Judy there helping us with the ethics of, can we make people think they've committed murder? Is that okay? Maybe it's not okay for a university to do, but can a TV show do it? Bottom line is we learned a lot. And so, Judy, I wanted you here today to talk with me about running experiments on people, okay, but also running experiments on people for a TV show. Because there are all kinds of limitations and issues that come up. And I think that what we just saw is a great example of all the different things that happen that are both good and bad, challenges and opportunities for Mindfield when it comes to psychological experiments.
Sure.
So the biggest problem we have is it's not possible for us to run enormous numbers of participants.
Right.
We have a very tight schedule, and we have a whole crew working with us. We cannot run hundreds or thousands of people. We can run like a couple dozen.
Right.
And sometimes that's not enough to really get a statistically significant result.
Right.
Also, I think it's very clear here, the kinds of participants who come onto the show, they don't even know they're on a TV show, by the way, until the end when we debrief them, but the kinds of people who are available here in LA, in the middle of the day,
right,
is both a very narrow and a very wide group of people.
Right.
If we were running this at a university and we needed people to be free in the middle of the day, we would get a very homogenous group.
Yeah.
They would be predominantly young people between like 19 and 22. Their worldviews would be pretty similar. I mean, they're all at the same institution. They're probably socioeconomically pretty well off because they're at this university. Their cultural backgrounds might be much more similar than what we find working in TV, where we might get retired people and immigrants and really young people and actors, a lot of actors.
Right, yes.
Oh my gosh. The number of people in LA who are free to do studies in the middle of the day
Oh my
who are
goodness.
also part-time actors is huge, which then always leads to the issue of the audience at home goes, wait a second, and they Google up something and they go, that person was on a TV show
Right.
once. Is this
Just saw
all
them
just
yesterday.
fake? And it's like, that's what it's like to see to just grab who's available in LA.
Right.
But because of the diversity that we get, I think our populations represent the country better, but also we have way more noise.
Yes.
Questions about how bad is it to deface an American monument are going to have very different answers
Yes.
from different people.
Absolutely.
And in this particular study, we had that problem. We're trying to see if you'll enforce your worldview more or less if you're reminded that you're going to die someday.
Right.
And the issue was that everyone showing up had very different worldviews.
Yes.
All right, so I've just thrown a whole bunch of stuff at
A
you.
lot of stuff to talk about. Well, first of all, I thought it was fascinating the way that it was set up, and it was a really, really good episode to watch, and just to see the reactions of the proponents of the theory. That was so cool that you got them to be in it.
I
Because they're
know.
invested in the theory. You know?
That was so cool, and both
Yeah.
of them wrote all of those scenarios.
Yes.
And it was truly science in action. They came up with scenarios. We found out, wow, some of these are just so extreme, even to a control group, that we don't see any room for any other variables to change in that direction.
Right.
So we had to rewrite them in between days, and gosh, it was true science.
Yeah, no, it was really cool to see it in action, and it was really cool to see how different the control group and the experimental group was in terms of the latency and even their facial responses as they were considering all of this. I certainly saw that being a significant effect, that they just seemed like they were taking their roles so much more seriously, right? Whereas sometimes when you get these people to come in for an experimental study, they're just here for their whatever, $10 or whatever you're offering them for their time. And, you know, they're more haphazard about it. And I certainly saw that with that second group. There was just this real pronounced sense of gravity to their considerations.
Yeah, we thought, you know what, the severity of punishment dealt out, that will be the variable that will change based on mortality salience. But it turned out to be disposition and thoughtfulness.
Totally.
Luckily, we recorded the whole thing, so we could go back and say, how long did they take? That wasn't originally measured, but because of the footage, we could time, and we found out that it took almost twice as long for the group that came in thinking, I've just written an essay about what I think death will be like.
Right.
Punishing people for violating cultural norms, this is a heavy thing too, and they reacted differently.
Yeah. And I think that it may not be. I mean, I understand the original tenets of terror management theory, but I can also imagine when somebody is really very cognizant of their mortality, that they might actually be more lenient, like life is short. I want this person to have a second chance. And so I think part of what wasn't measured that might have been helpful is actually trying to counterbalance the two groups in terms of, do you have the same types of belief systems and ideologies, right? Because if we don't have that, then they're kind of just going at their own values. And if we don't know very much about it, you can see why that noise could contribute to the average being 4.5 and 4.7 in the two groups.
Exactly, which is basically no difference at all.
Right, yeah.
But yes, I think in hindsight, and this is again the whole point of science, is to be like, all right, what can we learn and how can we keep at all times the uncertainty on this track down and down and down.
Yeah.
And right, if we kind of knew what people's worldviews were ahead of time, like if we had interviewed them a couple of weeks before, long enough ago that they don't remember it anymore, right? Make them somehow not think that it matters too much that the questions are related. You know, then the test, I think, could have given us better results in terms of the punishments dealt out and all of that. But it can be frustrating when you want to do a show and you want to show results and teach, but you also want to experiment.
Yes.
And sometimes the experiment won't always leave you with everything nicely tied up.
Right.
And that's a good lesson to give people, but it has been frustrating to do experiments where you need a big population of people. It's easier on the minefield to make myself the guinea pig or focus on a topic where we just need to see it happen one time.
Right,
Like, can I get someone to falsely confess to a crime? If I get one person to do it, then we're done.
Right.
But if I want to see a tendency for people to be more punitive to worldview, of their worldview violations, if they're reminded of death, I really need to run hundreds of people. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? Do we need to remind the audience of that every time?
You know, honestly, I don't think so. And I would say, first of all, that social psychology experiments especially are built on the backbone of very homogenous populations. It's tended to always involve undergraduate students who are given the option of either doing this 10-minute experiment or writing a 15-page paper. It's not really very ethical, actually, because you're kind of coercing them towards the experiment. And so you're going to get lots of first and second year psychology students. And again, it's still for a class, so how honest are they really being? Because what if the professor discovers what their answers are? And so there's all kinds of things that are already inherently an issue in even the published studies in social psychology. And I think what a TV experiment really does that I don't think any more kind of, you know, planned out research study with hundreds and thousands of participants will do is a really lively and visual demonstration. And that in itself is really useful because if somebody actually says, now I want to take that study protocol and apply it to 500 people, they now have a template to do
Which they
that.
should do, by the way.
Yeah.
Please do that. That would be, Mindfield would have done its job. But yeah, I think the responsibility I have with Mindfield is to document how science is done and what results might look like and what the protocols can be. And then the comments wind up being full of people with different ideas how they would have done it differently. And I'm like, perfect.
Awesome that people want to weigh in and be so engaged.
Exactly. Go off and do that. You know, we really didn't know how that experiment would go. And I still don't know how it would go if you changed one little thing in one way or the other.
Well, and I think it also shows the beauty of what an ad hoc analysis can do. Like oftentimes you have your hypotheses, like for example, your hypothesis was that you would go in and you would see that there was gonna be more severity in terms of ratings of punishments in the experimental group, but actually you didn't see that. And then you thought, but something else was happening because we saw the videotape and oh, it's how long they took. And you were able to go back and cull that data and to make a statement about that. And that difference was significant. It was almost double the amount of time that the experimental group, it was cool to see that.
It was cool, and you could feel a difference in the mood, which it's hard to measure, but you know what? When you are recording everything from multiple angles, you have that evidence, right? You have that documentation.
They seemed stressed. Like when I was watching, I felt bad for them. Like they just looked so upset, you know?
They weren't fun scenarios. It's like, hey, this person botched a surgery because they lied about their qualifications, or this doctor got drunk and hurt someone. They're pretty bad things to think about anyway.
This really just brings up, though, you know, kind of the spirit of why we do experiments in the first place, because it's always a cost-benefit analysis. And I think we talked about this also on the trolley episode. You know, it's really about what kind of information you're getting. Are you just torturing people for fun and using your hidden cameras for fun? Or are you providing some kind of educational value or a way that people can process important issues like mortality? When I first saw you in the casket, I gotta tell you, that's one of my worst fears. We talked about this on the most recent episode I worked on with you. That is my biggest fear, is death. So that you are providing some value and insight to people who are thinking about, how do I make the most of my time on this earth? And does it mean if I take my moral decisions a little bit more carefully that I'm gonna feel better about myself and my life at the end of the day? Because that could be providing some kind of insight for people to better their lives.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of every experiment we run. The debriefing, where I get to say, here's what we're studying. And people, they've never gone, oh, okay, cool, can I get my money now? They're always like, well, they want the money. But also, of course, they're like, wow, oh yeah, because I was feeling this. And they're excited to think about it on the car home, and they're gonna tell their friends about it that night. And I hope it does a lot of good for them, even if sometimes they may have been a little bit scared halfway through.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is really the core of why the experiments are important on TV. Because you are gonna get a more engaged audience, and if it encourages people to think about themselves and to encourage personal development, to tell their friends and family, then I think you've done a great job. So I don't think that you have to necessarily say, and by the way, maybe this experiment would turn out different if you had 500 people running it. Because the visual aspects of the experiment as it is built is what's triggering these people to really do that self-evaluation versus reading it on a page. I mean, that's part of the problem with experiments, is that they're in these journals that you have to be a psychologist to subscribe, or just a really interested person who's not a psychologist, but you want to pay your $500 a year.
Right, so you have to also be really rich. Because you're getting like a weekly thing and it's huge. Oh my gosh.
No one's
I hate
going to
that.
read that. So this is a great way for people to understand experiments and not feel afraid. You know, a lot of people will tell me, I'm afraid to run experiments. That seems like a lot of work to do. Well, the way that it was broken down in the episode, it doesn't really look like people can't do a version of it themselves sometime, you know?
It did take a lot of work. We have the best crew
You made
ever.
it look easy.
Yeah, we made it look easy. Love to hear that. I also think what we just saw is a good way to talk about hidden camera shows.
Yeah.
Because a common question I get is, how do the people not know they're on TV? How do they not see the cameras? And they don't.
They don't.
We do a really good job. I mean,
exciting.
we're in LA and I'm working with the best hidden camera people. I mean, I go into the room and I'm like, but aren't we gonna film this? And they're like, we're filming it right now.
From 5 cameras.
Yeah, the ways they have to disguise cameras, I've always said we need to cover that on the show.
Yeah.
So that people know how how well hidden the cameras were.
Yeah, because they were excellent angles too. You know, you
I
got
know,
really
but
good.
guess what? The producers are like, no, because then people will know the secrets.
Oh, trade secrets.
And they'll know what to look at. Trade secrets, but also they don't want future participants to go, you know what? If I see that pattern, there's probably a camera behind it. It works because people don't know how we're hiding them so well. If you look at the projector screen, you can see that there's a band across it of a different texture, and that is something that a camera can see through. But in the room, you don't think anything of it. It's just this boring feature and no one notices. And then when we tell them they're on TV, they're all like, what?
Right.
So there's a whole other permission form they have to sign after they learn that.
Sure.
Because we can't tell them beforehand, or else people will act different if they know that there's going to be an audience out there watching later.
Yes, absolutely. And we see that a lot in social psychology studies. I mean, even just the presence of more people in the room can already impact how they respond. So in this particular scenario, there was one experimenter. It feels less like an audience, but sometimes you'll have 3 or 4 experimenters, and it does really, like in a big way, affect how people start to deal with themselves, deal with each other. You can sometimes see them being more polite, a little bit more ginger with things, and it's only because they think that other people are watching and taking notes about them.
You know what? This makes me want to bring up something else. We really need to get back into the episode, but like, come on, I can do whatever I want, right? So, Minefield began as this idea I had for a show that at the time I called Prankology. Because when I was a student in high school and college, psychology professors would often show candid camera clips and then talk about the social psychology that was evident in those clips. The clips were entertaining, the science was cool. I'm like, let's do that. And pranks were kind of a thing because of Punk'd. This was a while back, right? But all of the pranks that like networks wanted to do essentially only taught one thing, fight or flight. They just wanted people to get really scared and freak out and pee their pants. Luckily, YouTube saw that there was value in something like this. We're like, so is anyone gonna scream? Is anyone gonna think their car was totaled? And I'm like, no, they're just gonna respond to a question with a number. But interestingly, you have to make that interesting. How do you have someone fill out a survey and have it be good visually?
Right.
Well, we came up with the idea of having them write their number and then show it to the proctor of the study so that the camera could see what number they wrote. That's the whole reason they did it that way rather than fill it in and turn the paper in.
Which of course changes results too, because if it's a private opinion versus one that they're showing,
they're showing, then their face is associated with it.
Yeah.
But at the last minute, we had to put those blinders up so they couldn't see what other people next to them were doing because we knew that that would affect it.
Yep.
So we had to walk the line of, okay, we want them to put the number up next to their face for the camera, but we don't want that to affect how they answer the question. So how do we make sure that it still feels as private as possible?
Right.
A lot of thinking goes in this.
A lot of thinking, a lot of thinking. And I also wonder too, just even the characteristics of the experimenter in the room, the actor that you guys hired. Again, with certain of those questions, there could also be a response of, well, this person might judge me if I rate this a 7, just based on their own perception of what that person might be.
Exactly. That is something that is worth investigating more, experimenting with more. What I can say is that during those trials, the direction we gave Trin, who's our wonderful actress, she's just perfect at this kind of role and many others, but we told her, you have to kind of act bored Like you've been doing this all day and you don't care what they write down.
Yeah.
That
no
way they'll
gasp
just be,
of surprise.
yeah, you're not gonna be like, oh, you gave it a 1?
Yeah.
Also, she just read a script. She read
Right.
each word off a page, so it was always the same language and it was just monotone, which is a funny direction to give someone who is like a really talented actress to be
Right.
like, we need you to
as boring as possible.
be as boring as possible and as least acting as possible.
Right.
As little acting as possible.
Yep.
Judy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always
so fun.
a pleasure.
Awesome.
All right, we're gonna continue watching this episode. When we come back, I will have a new guest, but not new to you or me, so actually not a new guest at all. I'll have a different guest. Let's get ready to learn more about whether Michael should die. Our pilot test shows that there's still a lot to discover about terror management, and many promising ways to do it. I'm particularly intrigued by our observation that for all the closed-mindedness mortality salience appears to cause, it also led to what looked like increased consideration and thought. I'd love to see more research on that idea. But the point is this: if death's effects aren't all entirely bad, what if, instead of, or at least at the same time that we hope for the abolition of natural death, we also find a way to accept it? Now, obviously, I don't want to die, at least not soon, but accepting the inevitability of my own death and being less afraid of it feels powerful and honest. I'd like to learn what that looks like, and I have a friend who can help. I'm paying a visit to Caitlin Doty, a mortician, author, and death positivity activist who has made an entire career out of discussing the aspects of death that most of us prefer to ignore. What do you say to someone who comes to you and says, I think death is terrifying, it's so scary and sad that I'm just here now?
Is this person dying, or is this person...
This person is me in front of you right now.
This person is you, okay,
Yeah.
so... I would tell you a couple things. First, you're dealing with the primal existential quandary of human existence.
Yes.
And you are one of, the many billions of people who have felt this. So you're not alone in feeling this way. So we go through life, we reach a certain age, and we begin to understand that someday ourselves and everyone we love will die. And that's powerful, painful knowledge. And I think from that moment, we have to start developing defense mechanisms to handle that and to integrate that into our lives.
So what are those defense mechanisms?
I think that the more obvious ones would be having a child, writing a book, making a TV show, creating a legacy of some kind. But there's also a more insidious version, which is war, taking other countries, being rich and being okay with other people being poor. I think those are all signs of death denial. They're all saying, but I'm okay because I have this money, or I have this power, or I have these kind of dark impulses that allow me to say, at least I can outrun death in that way. And of course, that's not true. No one can outrun death, but you can trick yourself into believing that.
So how would you characterize the Western relationship to death?
Take America 150 years ago. If you were my husband and you died, I would be entirely in charge of you. I would wash your body. I would get the neighbor to make a wooden coffin for you. We would put you in the coffin and carry you on our shoulders to the grave which someone had dug themselves.
Right.
It would have been an entirely self-sufficient process. But what happened around the turn of the 20th century is really three big things in my mind. One, you had the rise of hospitals, so people were no longer dying at home. You had the rise of funeral homes, which means that we are now outsourcing our death. Third one is slaughterhouses. So all of a sudden, all food production and the killing of animals is also hidden as well. And we live in our suburban houses where all those things are outsourced. And it's just these layers and layers and layers of denial around death.
But what does it mean to accept death?
I don't think that you ever truly accept death, but I believe that the movement toward accepting death involves really true self-awareness about where you're hiding your fears of death. That's where real awareness and acceptance can come from.
For me, the thing that's just such a bummer about death is that I'm done. I don't get to continue learning things and seeing what happens, and I'm just not part of Earth anymore.
Isn't death kind of what gives you that passion when you think about it? When you think about, like, I love learning, I love ideas. If you didn't have an endpoint, are you going to come in here today with all these cameras and do the huge amount of legwork that creating a show requires?
No.
No, right, because you're like, I don't know, maybe I'll do it 200 years from now. Whereas right now you're taking in information left and right because you want to produce content, you want to produce exciting things and share with other people.
Because this is my one chance.
This is your one chance. The passion and the realness to life comes from it ending. That's the great gift that death gives us.
What's an unhealthy relationship to have to your own mortality?
The pursuit of immortality and the pursuit of I will stay alive until I can upload my brain into the cloud, that worries me. The idea that everyone is just allowed to live forever from here on out is not environmentally sensible. It's not, it's just not a sensible position to take.
We are seeing the dawn of a new era of possibilities unfold on planet Earth. What will our amazing world be like in, say, 80, 100, or even 200 years from now? Wouldn't you like the possibility of finding out?
To understand why some people feel like death shouldn't be inevitable, I've come to S.T.A.L.K.E.R, one of the world's leading life extension facilities.
Linda.
Hi, how are you?
Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Welcome to S.T.A.L.K.E.R.
Thank you for having me here. I'm meeting Linda Chamberlain, who co-founded S.T.A.L.K.E.R nearly 46 years ago.
So this facility that we are in right now is where you both cryopreserve people and store them.
Yes. We have 160 patients.
Wow.
And we have 1,190 something members. It changes. So.
And a member is someone who is alive today.
Alive today. They've made the arrangements for this. Once they are cryopreserved, they become patients.
You're using the word patient.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about why you use that word.
For us, death is not something which is like an on-off switch. 1 second you're alive, the next second you're dead. What we are trying to do is to slow down and stop the dying process.
To become a patient at S.T.A.L.K.E.R, first you have to pay between $80,000 and $200,000. Then you have to die. Or more specifically, be pronounced clinically dead. This generally means that your heart and lungs have stopped functioning. At that point, S.T.A.L.K.E.R can begin their work.
Now there are two ways that a person could sign up for this procedure, either as a whole body patient or as a neuro.
Oh, and does neuro just mean head?
It means, yes, the cephalon actually, which is all of the structures down to about the clavicle. I'm a neuro. Everybody in my family who's now in stasis is a neuro.
Really?
Most of the people who really understand the technology are neuros. The primary reason that people choose whole body is emotional.
Of course.
And they're not comfortable with the idea of their body being removed and discarded. So let's say that our patient is whole body. The moment the patient is pronounced, they go into an ice bath, and this is just crushed ice, and it's water in there as well. Their heart is started again with a mechanical thumper. They're intubated, and their lungs are functioning again, being ventilated, circulating the cooler temperatures.
Yeah. So you need the veins, the arteries, the vasculature, the heart. You need all of those continuing to pump and circulate.
This is our operating room.
Wow.
So basically, when the patient comes in through the door there, they'll go into this specially developed operating table. It is going to be circulating nitrogen gas over them to help cool them externally. And if it's a whole body patient, then the surgeons open the chest, and then we begin circulating the organ transplant solution.
Once in the operating room, the patient's blood is replaced with cooled organ transplant fluid and circulated through the vascular system to rapidly cool down the internal and external temperatures of the body. Now, just before the water within the body tissue reaches its freezing point, cryoprotective fluids are introduced. These act like antifreeze, preventing the formation of ice crystals that could damage soft tissue. This is called the vitrification process.
Now, let's say that it is a neuro patient, so they come in first here.
Yep, their whole body.
Right, the surgeons will do the neuro separation first.
Okay, yeah, that
They
makes sense.
separate the cephalon, which is all of the structures down to about the clavicle. Bring it over here to this operating field, wash the blood out, and we introduce the organ transplant solution.
I'm imagining a person's cephalon, essentially their head in here. I can see how it's going to get clamped in.
Yeah.
That looks like, I'm sure, a crazy sci-fi movie, but it really happens.
It really happens.
After the vitrification process is complete, the patients are placed inside bags that are attached to open metal cases, which are then placed inside cylindrical tanks filled with liquid nitrogen called dewars.
So this is our patient care bay. We have 159 patients.
In these tanks right here?
In these tanks. There are approximately 9 patients in each one of these, 4 whole bodies and 5 neuros. This one right here is where my husband is currently
This one right here.
housed. Right, this is where Fred is at the moment. My mother and my father-in-law are in this one.
Wow, it's so weird because I am right now not in a graveyard.
No, S.T.A.L.K.E.R is very much like an ambulance taking their loved ones to a hospital, not down the street, but a hospital in the future.
Yeah.
When technology can help them.
They're not being transported through space, but through time.
To see what drives this time-traveling ambulance, I'm going to sit down with Max Moore, S.T.A.L.K.E.R's CEO and a future neuro patient.
So Max, what's the status of the technology needed to revive cryopreserved specimens? Are we getting closer?
We are getting closer. It's going to be decades at least before we can bring back human beings, whole human beings. But we already cryopreserve eggs, sperm, we cryopreserve skin, corneas, heart valves, all kinds of things. So those are single tissues, and we can reverse that process. Now, you move from that to an organ, things get more difficult. But we actually did an experiment a few years ago. Took this little tiny worm, we used a certain chemical so it would learn that, oh, my food's over here and not over here. And then we cryopreserved them, and then we just waited, brought them back, and then we tested them. We were able to demonstrate with the memory test that the ones that had received the training retained that memory. So it's the first time any whole organism we've proven the survival of memory. So now we're asking, okay, what's the next step? Because whole organisms are difficult to reverse right now, but step by step, the more progress we can make, the more convincing this is.
Wow. When it comes to extending life, some questions come up like, should people die? I know we don't like the idea of death, but do we lose something by getting rid of death?
Yeah, I think we will lose something, like we lost something when we got rid of slavery or smallpox. So I think people tie themselves in knots to rationalize death. I believe that right now we're kind of in this tragic situation where over time, hopefully you kind of learn, your wisdom grows over time. At the same time, your cognitive and physical health is declining. That's really sucks. That's a bad situation. What if they both could keep going up indefinitely? So you could live for hundreds of years or longer and get smarter and more knowledgeable and wiser, and hopefully more mature, and have more foresight because you've got a much longer planning horizon. What we'll have is a world of, I call ultra mature people, which I think will actually be a better world than the one we have today. And if they say, well, and this comes up all the time, they say, well, death is what gives life meaning. Bullshit. Okay, if that was true, then would they also advocate people who live to 90, should we kill them off at 45? Will that double the meaning of their life? In fact, I think life gets more meaning the longer you live because you can build on what you've done before. So if anything, it increases the meaningfulness of life, in my view.
You're making me realize that in many ways I am rationalizing death. I'm looking for ways to excuse it and accept it. I don't think it's unhealthy to accept that you are mortal.
Well, I have to accept it because I could get killed at any time. One thing I have to stress, because every article written, they always have to use the word forever or immortality, and that's not on the table here. We're just offering a chance for people to be revived in a time when we've beaten aging. but eventually something's going to get you. So we're not offering immortality, we're offering an unknown extension of human lifespan.
Okay, so Elizabeth, welcome back.
Thanks.
Pretty heavy stuff. You have a connection to Al-K.E.R. In fact, you were the one who, I think, got us that interview.
Yeah, I set up the visit.
So how did you come into contact with Al-K.E.R?
Well, I grew up near San Francisco in the Bay Area. So I think, Al-K.E.R has always been in my consciousness and my awareness since I was a kid. I was familiar with the philosophy of it, and I probably have a dozen friends or so who are members.
I think you even are friends with the couple on the brochure about Al-K.E.R.
That's
that
right,
people
yeah,
get.
and Max is a friend as well.
Right.
Yeah, the CEO.
So I guess the next question is, are you a member?
I'm not a member yet, but I intend to be at some point.
So what's keeping you from doing it? The cost?
It's just the cost right now. Yeah, that's it. And also the fact that, honestly, if I were to die right now, the chance of being cryonically frozen is pretty low, because the way I would die would probably be in a motorbike accident in India or something like that. So it'd be hard to get the cephalon back to the Al-K.E.R lab in time.
Yeah, the best, it's weird to talk about this, the best way to die, to be cryonically frozen, is to die right there near their facility. I think they've said that they have a lot of members who, near the end of their life, move to the Scottsdale area so that when they die, they can be taken right away. Or actually, an Al-K.E.R team can be at your deathbed.
Right.
Now, the best way to be frozen, and this is kind of what makes me feel like we have a long way to go, is that the best way for me to be cryo-frozen and then brought back later is for someone to literally kill me right now. Stick me in the ice bath right now, start pumping in the fluid to cool my body down and kill me by cooling me. If I die in any other way, there will be too much cell death, or at least there will be some. Because for a split second, while the law decides that I am, whether I'm dead or not, my cells are already dying.
Right. Yeah, and also, I suppose by that logic, you would also want to do it as early in your life as possible when your brain is in the best possible state.
Exactly. I wonder if they've ever had a member say, all right, I have cognitive decline, and it's happening to the tissues in my brain. If you preserve me when I finally am pronounced dead by an authority, what brain will I have left? That's what I'm stuck with.
Right.
They may believe that in the future we can just reconstruct an entire consciousness by just knowing a little bit about some of the brain connections and structures. But I guess all of this brings us to what Caitlin was saying. She really was uncomfortable with that idea, that it seems, what were her words? Nonsensible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think living forever, immortality, is pretty nonsensical. And even Al-K.E.R will say, and even Max says, that what they're striving for is not immortality. It's just extending the life that we have. And there's many ways that we do that already.
We already
with antibiotics and vaccinations and things like that.
Right, just wearing a seatbelt is a life extension protocol. What Al-K.E.R does seems much more sci-fi.
It does.
And, I also understand a lot of the criticisms around the cost. The cost filters out only a certain kind of person to be preserved. If we can bring back frozen people in the future, those from now in history will predominantly be, hi, I'm a Silicon Valley millionaire or billionaire, and I'm back, and now it's the year 8000, and I'm back.
Right, and certain personality traits
only
as
certain
well that
personality
go along with
traits.
that, yeah.
Yeah. So is that possibly not going to represent our era well in the future if only those with the means to extend their life in that way do so?
Another thing that goes along with that is I think that people who have abundance are also more likely to want to extend their life, not just because they can, but because they're living a good life. And so Al-K.E.R is not, I mean, at least for me, it's not about denying death. It's not because I'm terrified of dying. It's because I actually love life. enjoy every moment of it. And the only tragedy is, like you said, that at some point, I won't be able to keep learning. I won't be able to keep growing. I won't be able to keep discovering new things. So people who enjoy life, who have the fortune of being able to do all of that, naturally want that to continue.
Now, I get some of the reactions people have, like, well, but it's not environmentally sensible, and it's, you know, we only have a finite amount of resources. I get all of that. I hope that that ceases to be a problem. I think more human lives is just better. And to think any other way is ridiculous. You know, we need to make sure we can sustain all of those lives and give people good lives. Yeah. But
and that critique is about overpopulation?
That's what I'm saying, yeah. I feel like any negative side effects of overpopulation could be fixed by the time we're also able to literally bring back a frozen brain, okay? We should be working on both.
Yeah.
But I'm basically throwing that off the table because I don't really care. I think it's not going to be an issue in the future so long as we keep focusing on it. Problems of overpopulation and we need humans to die or else we're not gonna have enough beef for everyone. And it's like, all right, let's fix that. But assuming that that's fixed, I still feel like there's a kind of hubris that turns me off to the idea of extending your life like this. Why do you think that you get to live longer in this, I hate to say artificial, because seatbelts are artificial.
Right.
They're technology we invented to make us not die so often and quickly.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, it does feel kind of self-indulgent to be able to say, here I am, I'm so special, I get to be one of the few that survived in the future. And I guess my counter-argument to that is whenever, with any new technology, it's always initially only limited to a subset of people who are risk takers, early adopters, who have the financial means to do it, who have the sort of foresight or sort of long-term perspective to want to do that in the first place. And just because that's a small set of the population doesn't mean that those people shouldn't do it. In fact, on the contrary, that's the first step to making it accessible to everyone.
I brought up a point to Max that I think is in the bonus footage, but didn't make it into the episode, about social progress and how if we wind up with 500, 600, 700-year-old super mature people, what if their ideas about the way society's organized doesn't change? And we wind up getting stuck, not making progress.